Hey, Space Coach, you know what? Hey, Space Coach, you know what? No, seriously, you know what?
What?
That's what? That's you good, buddy. That's what? That's what?
Brack, if you don't stop doing that annoying whatever it is you're doing, I'm going to blast Zorak.
I don't believe you.
You don't?
No, I don't.
Believe it.
I, Triple Dog, dare you to do that again.
No, you don't. No.
Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy?
Hi guys, it's Miss Meyer with another episode of the Miss Meyer Show. So today we are going over Chapter 5, Part 1. Remember, you do not have a physical textbook, only I do. So let's get that out of the way. I always tell you guys that, that's for my new kiddos. We're using this textbook. It's the Louisiana Experience. It's when you go in to log into your textbook using the link that I gave you, you're gonna have two books. One's gonna be an image thing. Don't even worry about that one. This is the one you want to open. So we're going to be using this. We're going to Chapter 5, Part 1, and that begins on page, as you can see, I have it all bookmarked here, so I have some semblance of organization. It's going to begin on 166, so that's where we're starting. Starting on page 166, and we're going all the way to page 180. So that's where we are. All right, so let's start talking. Get out your guided notes template or just, listen or whatever. So we're talked about now that Spain has given up control of Louisiana over to France. Napoleon Bonaparte is now the ruler of France, and now he has control of Louisiana once again. Now, Napoleon's whole purpose of why he wanted Louisiana really was because he had this dream to take over the world, and part of his dream to take over the world would require that he would have a lot of people, soldiers and things like that would need to go and fight against his arch nemesis, which was England. Well, he was going to use the island of Saint Dominique, because that was French too. This is like before that rebellion really happened, and Louisiana to produce huge amounts of food in order to feed his troops, because there's lots of available land, especially in Louisiana and over in what is modern day Haiti. So he was going to use Louisiana land and Haitian land to grow massive amounts of crops that his soldiers were going to need to stay strong and, to fight. So the problem happened when there was this huge revolt in Saint Dominique, and the Haitians now had become their own country. They had their rebellion and they became their own country. So now Napoleon kind of said, oh, I guess I don't have Haiti anymore or Saint Dominique, so I really don't have a huge reason to keep Louisiana. I mean, this is not vital to my plan. Well, at the same time, let's talk about serendipitous, okay? Serendipitous is when all things happen at the perfect time. So at this time, the president is now Thomas Jefferson, okay? George Washington's gone and dead. John Adams gone. He's still alive, but he's no longer the president. So now it's Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson sends this guy, and his name is Robert Livingston, and he sends him to go over and talk to Napoleon. And Napoleon is like, he's not a really kind of guy that you're going to sit and have a conversation with, okay? Napoleon is all about Napoleon, okay? That's why there's called the Napoleon complex. He thinks he is going to be the next ruler of the world and take over everything. He's like Pinky and the Brain, which is another really good cartoon that I'm going to start implementing into the Miss Meyer shows. And he's like, what are we going to do today, Pinky? Take over the world. The same thing we do every night. Brain. No, yeah. Anyway, you'll see, because I'll start including it. But anyway, so he wants to take over the world. So when Livingston goes to France and he tries to have a conversation with him, it's not going to... Okay, good. So it doesn't go over well, obviously. He doesn't want to hear what he has to say. He basically just poo-poos the whole thing and says, oh, Livingston, just whatever, get away, go away. I don't want to hear it. Go away. You are insignificant to me. Right now, I've got my hands full dealing with what's going on with Great Britain or England at the time. So he's kind of like defeated. And so he's like, oh, what should I do? You know, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And so eventually he sticks around. And so Jefferson sends somebody else. He says, hey, you know what? I'm going to send another person. The two of you work together. Maybe you can get him to agree to some sort of deal, because they wanted Napoleon to sell them basically. They wanted to sell them where, I'm going to tell the tract of land. He wanted to, I wanted to give you the exact coordinate. Here we go. Oh, where is it? Okay. I wanted to give you the exact amount what they really wanted. They didn't want all of what became the Louisiana Purchase. They did not at all. Jefferson sent them there with the instructions of saying, spend no more than $10 million, try to get the upper part of Florida from him, and try to get this portion of Louisiana where we can control the mouth of the Mississippi. Because remember, everybody wants that mouth of the Mississippi River, because that's how all the goods get transferred from place to place. So they all want that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get comfortable in my chair. It's not working. Okay, I don't know why. I don't know. I just have an issue with this chair. This is the chair that I sat in and broke my headphones because it's like goes all over the place. And I put this chair together because I read instructions and my husband doesn't. So I put this chair together by myself with instructions, and I would never tell him this. So you guys have to keep it on the DL. But I ended up with a lot of spare parts like this. And like, word to the wise, you should not have spare parts. Okay, if you have spare parts, you did not do something. So I have these big spare parts, and I've hidden them in my desk so that he can't find them. But watch. I think this is like really, like this right here, these things, I think they serve a purpose because my chair doesn't work correctly. And so I don't want him to know that I didn't put these in. So I'm hiding them, but I really think that that's the reason my chair is all kind of crazy, because I just didn't do these. But oh well, we're not going to say anything. So just FYI, that's why my chair is all crazy, wonky. So anyway, so he sends them there. He gives them, tells them, I really just want you to spend $10,000, because they didn't really have a lot of money. America was a baby nation. They weren't some rich nation. They were having trouble collecting taxes from all these people that were living in all these different states. From the 13 original colonies to all of these new territories that were coming, America had a really hard problem making money in order to pay for things. So Jefferson said, $10 million is the max amount. That's all I'm giving you, and this is what I want. I just want this area that's part of the Mississippi River, and I want this area for Florida, right here. We need you just, that way we can just have all of this whole section, this whole part. Can you guys see it? They really, oh, that's bright, sorry. So they really only wanted from here to like right here. This is what they wanted, this whole area, just right here. That's all they wanted. So Monroe comes along and he's going to help Livingston, and he says, look, we got to get this guy to agree to something. We need to figure out what he's, how we can get him to agree. Well, Napoleon, like I'm telling you, it's serendipitous. Everything starts falling into place. He gets into a giant fight with England, like massive fight. And he needs all of his money. He needs all of his troops. He needs every asset that he can get in order to beat Great Britain. Because even though Great Britain did lose to America, he really, when they had fought this, the American Revolution, it wasn't just America. It was America and France, some parts of Germany, and some Spain, all these things. So, but now France is no longer under a monarchy. They're ruled by a dictator, and now they want to take everything back, and they want it from England. And so when Napoleon is going to go against England, which is still a very massive country, big time country, he knows that he needs all the money he can get. So he calls up Livingston, and he calls up Monroe, and he says, come on in here, I want to tell you something. I have an idea. I don't want Louisiana anymore. It's not it's no use to me. You know how like I don't even want it anymore. Fine, here. And he says, but I'm not going to sell you just Louisiana. I'm willing to sell you all of this land. He just put the whole thing out right here. You guys can see that in your textbook. I'm going to sell you all of this for $15 million. Livingston and Monroe was like, oh my gosh, that's the biggest deal ever. I was like, this is how I feel. Sometimes on Black Friday, which I do go every year. I'd say that. It's horrible because I take my kids, and it's cruel and unusual punishment for myself, but I still go. And so like I would see something like this camera set. There was like a Nikon camera set or something like that, and it was on Black Friday. And I said, I'm not gonna spend a lot of money. Okay, I'm only gonna spend about $200. All I'm gonna spend. This whole camera set was $500, but it came with the camera, 2 lenses, a carrying case, everything. I was like, that's a deal. I guess I'm gonna have to just up my budget, and so I didn't buy it. But now it's probably out of date. It's probably something new out, whatever. That's the problem with electronics. But that's the same thing that's going on with Livingston and Monroe. They're like, hey, oh my gosh, I know you only said that we had a budget of 10 million, but look at what we get if we spend a little bit more. And these are the days where they can't just call up call up Thomas Jefferson. They can't text him something. They can't get over email or Skype. So they kind of made this purchase without really getting approval from Jefferson. They really didn't have the authority to make this kind of decision, but they agreed to it anyway. And they said, that's a deal. So when they finally got to Jefferson and said, hey, I know you said not to, but, I had to do this. I'm sorry. I did it for the good of the United States. Well, Jefferson was like, you made a good choice. You did a good thing. He wasn't angry at them by any means, but what he was very scared was because Jefferson was a huge supporter of the separation of individual states. So he did not want a large centralized government, and he didn't want one that would definitely make these kinds of purchases and choices without consulting the people. So for Livingston and Monroe to make such a huge decision, and one that really he didn't have approval of as president, Jefferson really wondered if he was actually acting constitutionally. So he had a lot of worries about that. But those worries were for naught, because the Constitutional Congress, or what we had at that time, the Senate, is not like it is today. It really isn't. And they just approved it and said, you're good, Jefferson. You're good. Don't worry about it. You're just good. Go ahead. No, we don't care. Go ahead. So now they had promised all this money to Napoleon that they really did not have, and they were having a lot of trouble collecting it. So they did eventually get it, and he took the money, they gave it over to Napoleon, and he gave them all of this land. Now, the people of Louisiana, like I'd always said before, and I want to say it all again, we are so unique. We are beautiful in culture that people don't have in other places, especially in other states, being that we are so in tune with our heritage and our culture that we, is a part of us. And also we like celebrations. We like, things that have fun. We like those things. So before Louisiana, America, the United States, could come over to Louisiana and say, okay, now we own you now. Now we're in charge. Thomas Jefferson knew that there would have to be some sort of transfer of power from Spain to France, and then from France to Louisiana, to America. So, and mostly to kind of appease the people of Louisiana, and especially New Orleans. So they had a ceremony, because we like to party, any excuse. And they took down the Spanish flag, and then they rose up the French flag. And because a lot of the people that were living in Louisiana were still French, they were like, yeah, going crazy. It was like big party days. 3 weeks later, and I want to make sure I give you the right time, because I never know exact dates. I know generalities, okay? So it's like it's like 3 weeks. Oh, 3 weeks. I was right. So like in 3 weeks, France goes and says, okay, we decided to change your ruling yet again. So they're like, wait, what? What are we gonna, I don't understand. So they hurried up and they said, okay, no, we are no longer in control of you, Louisiana. You are now part of the United States. The people living in Louisiana were not happy about this, because they were so used to living a certain way. And when they became Americans, it was a whole new way of life. The biggest thing was that from its inception, Louisiana was ruled by a monarchy. It was ruled by King Louis of France, and then it was ruled by this King of Spain, and then it was, you know, it was just for always having a monarchy in charge. So the people of Louisiana were used to that. That's what they liked. And so when America comes around and they say, okay, well, you're not under the control of a king. You are independent and part of the United States of America. Well, the people didn't like it. They were like, no, we don't want that. We put us back. We want a king. We want monarchy. It's kind of like, for me, from my personal point of view, I do not like the new Ninja Turtles that are coming on Nick Jr. I don't, okay? I was around when the original Ninja Turtles came out, and I was cool with it. I liked the cartoon version like that. What they're doing now is ridiculous. So they're trying to like make it so more high-tech looking and more cartoony. I'm like, give me my old Ninja Turtles. The same thing with the Magic School Bus. Why do I need a new Miss Frizzle? I like the old Miss Frizzle. I like the old school bus. I don't want these new people that are on Netflix. I want my old Miss Frizzle back. Okay? All right, so but this is the same way. I feel the same way when they try to remake movies. Oh my goodness, I lose it. I lose it. If they ever try and remake Gone with the Wind, I don't know what's going to happen. I may have a nervous breakdown. Truly, a nervous breakdown. So, but just drives me nuts. But the people of Louisiana were the same way. They're like, we don't want all these new rules. We don't want self-government. We don't know what it even means. We don't want to be able to decide what we're going to do. That's not what we want. We want, you know, our culture, our heritage. We want our French heritage back. And they're like, sorry, you're Americans now. So, sorry. So, and to make matters worse, because Louisiana, like I said, we're not the type of people that kind of go home quietly and sulk in private. You know, we're going to make it known that we do not like where we are and what we're doing. We are going to make sure that everyone knows it. Like my husband, we live in Dallas, and we had to go to a dinner party with some of his people that he works with. And I did not really like I didn't care for the behavior of some of the people there. It's just, you know, they were rude. They were like downright rude. If they would have done that kind of stuff in my mama's house, oh, but they were rude. And so, of course, my husband was trying to make like light of it and be like, oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. You know, we're not in New Orleans anymore. It's no big deal. I was like, we are. God, this is basic manners and basic rights. These people are rude. And so, like a true Louisianian, I was not happy to just kind of sulk in the corner and deal with it. I made my voice known. And I was like, you all are so rude that I can't believe that this is going on. Your table manners are deplorable. Needless to say, we haven't been invited back. I don't know why, right? So, but anyway, we in Louisiana, we're going to make it a no. We're going to make that we know that we don't like what's going on. And so Jefferson was keenly aware that he was going to have to really get somebody in there to kind of govern this whole transfer from Louisiana, from Spain to France, now to America, because the people were going berserk, okay? They were going off the wall, because when America finally had Louisiana, that opened up all this more land for them. And so you start getting a lot of people, Anglos is what they were called, and those were from the 13 original colonies that were all trickling down to come over into Louisiana. Well, these people that were trickling down the 13 original colonies and such were not French, they were not Spanish, they were European from other places, German, Dutch, English, all these places. And the big thing was they were not Catholic. And both Spain and France were both Catholic countries, nations. Okay, it was very, very, very ingrained in the Catholic Church. So when America opened up all this land in Louisiana, these people came, and they came with a different faith. In the Catholic faith, there's a very big influence by the Pope and the Church in Rome, also on saints and feast days and things like that. Well, the Protestants, this is what they mostly were coming in, and they were not only saying, we're not Catholic, they were openly saying, you're wrong, and this is not what you're supposed to do. So there came a lot of clash over religion, you know, because there's, you know, people who are Catholic, they celebrate different feast days, or there's Lent, and then there's, you know, just different things that Protestantism does not do. And so it would imply that was a huge problem. The second problem was that none of them were speaking the same language. None of them. Okay? You had the people that were coming from the 13 original colonies, they mostly spoke Dutch and German, maybe a little Italian. And then you had the people that were originally from Louisiana, that's your French Creoles that were speaking French. You had your Acadians who were also speaking French, your Isleños that were speaking Spanish. So, and then you had free people of color that were speaking, a different language altogether. You had people that were escaping the revolution in Haiti. They were pretty much speaking French too, but you had all of this and no one was speaking the same language. So you were like trying to communicate with someone. It's going to be it's pandemonium. I remember my mom, when I was growing up, she used to do these calls, like call people for a Times-Picayune. And she would have to call, like, all these people to say, are you getting the Times-Picayune? This is before, like, the internet and we could just put stuff in. I remember it was like big papers she had to fill out. And so she would, every now and then, she would get someone that spoke Spanish. And so she does not speak Spanish. My mother's Asian. My dad's Hispanic, but he's, at work. So, and this is before I learned the language as much as I do now. And I'm not 100% fluent either, even right now. But she would get on the phone and she'd be like, do you get the paper? And I was like, Mom, they speak a different language. They're not deaf. I mean, it was just like, why are you screaming at them? And then so it was just so stressful for the people in Louisiana because they could not communicate. There was no communication. The next big thing that really caused a problem, and you guys might see this now, and I can see how it is music. Louisiana, when it was under French and Spanish control, had a very unique music kind of genre. It took a little bit from France, a little bit from Spain, and a little bit from, the slaves that were coming in from, gosh, my cats. They closed the door with they're magic cats, so they know how to open my doors and close them. But I'm alone in the house, and so when I hear the cat, I'm like, arr, I get a little scared. It's just, I don't know, so it scares me. But anyway, and so we get a lot of our influence from lots of cultures and to come up with what would eventually be known as jazz. My favorite type of music, jazz, love it. Favorite type, I will pick it anytime. My favorite singer is Nina Simone. If you want to hear some awesome music that's better than anything that you guys are listening to, especially something crazy when people just start screaming, I hate that music. Nina Simone, check her out. She's phenomenal. Anyway, so the music was changing in Louisiana big time. So instead of hearing like the melodious beats of, the Congo drums and things that were coming, or the harmonious things of the Cajun music was mixed with the Isleños, they were hearing kind of like music that they did not like. Basically, like, think of country music. So if I'm sitting here and I'm going to a jazz club and I want to listen to jazz, it would be the equivalent of somebody getting up there and playing country music or like hair band metal, okay? So they would be like, what are you doing? Because we take fun seriously. And they're like, why are you playing that music? That is not music. And they could not really communicate because they didn't speak the same language. So it would eventually come to like them getting into massive fist fights, and to the point where it was just like pandemonium. And it was over things that were kind of silly, like music and things like that. So I don't have any water either. I should have prepared myself better. And so Claiborne comes, and his job is to really kind of say, okay, we are going to try and we're going to work together and we're going to become a state. We're going to work, and no longer are we going to be Acadians and Cajuns and Creoles and Isleños and free people of color and all these things and Canatoks. We're not going to do that because we're all going to be American. Well, obviously the people of Louisiana did not like that. They said it was a stupid idea, and they fought against it like crazy. They truly fought against it. So Claiborne now is in Louisiana, especially in New Orleans, because like I said, guys, this is where you are pretty area of commerce and where they had the most dealings. So New Orleans was like the capital city at this time. So while Claiborne's here in New Orleans, Thomas Jefferson starts sending people to go find out and discover and explore this whole huge tract of land now that they have gotten from Napoleon. So because it wasn't just Louisiana, it was a huge undiscovered part of the territory. So this is when he sends Lewis and Clark and eventually Sacagawea, and to explore all of this new land, and there's, you know, to search it out and to seek waterways and stuff like that. So this is the time period. So if we're looking at America as American history and then Louisiana history, the same time Claiborne is coming to Louisiana to try to establish kind of a normal government, Lewis and Clark are exploring all that other land with Sacagawea. So that's what's going on. That's at the period of time. So if we're looking at timelines, and I went like that instead of this way, you're looking at 1776 is when America finally became a country, well, when we declared our independence. Louisiana took over, the United States took over Louisiana in, what year? July 4th. What year is this? Just give me date. Oh, 1803. So this is during that time period. It's not a lot of time has passed, and there's a lot of changes, especially for Louisiana. Now, we're going to talk about the territorial period, because I explained this to you guys. I don't know if I did it in class or a small group, but I know I did it one way. But before a state could become a state, it had to be a territory first. And they were a territory for a period of time until they were sure that you could operate as a state. And that means that you had enough people that they were all willing to, work together and say, yeah, I'm an American, to come up with your own state constitution, and then you could become a state. So for this period, Louisiana wasn't even a state. It was a territory. And so what they did is they kind of changed the names. So the land that makes up most of what we have for modern day today, Louisiana, was called the Territory of Orleans. So what we think about today for Louisiana was the Territory of Orleans. All the rest of the land that was included with the Louisiana Purchase was called the District of Louisiana. And so that, out of the District of Louisiana, became different states, many different states. But what is now the state of Louisiana was the Territory of Orleans, okay? So that's pretty cool, I thought. So there's a lot, like I said, a lot of political changes that were happening, especially because Louisiana was originally ruled by kings and monarchs. And when you're ruled by a king or monarch or a queen or anything like that, you are told what to do. There is not a freedom. There's no freedom. There is like, this is what you're going to do, this is how I want it done, and this is how it's going to go. There's no kind of like, anyone can dissent or say, I don't agree with that, or I vote no. There wasn't anything like that. But that's all that they knew. They didn't know anything else. So just like somebody might come up to me and say, hey, the new Miss Frizzle is better because she's, she's funnier, she's voiced by Kristen Wiig, who is hilarious, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I've already have a brick wall. And I'm like, I don't care. Give me back my old Miss Frizzle. And that's how kind of the people of Louisiana were. So Claiborne had a really tough time getting them on his side. And so what he did, he really tried to establish a ruling, body of government without truly, angering the people of Louisiana. So he wanted them to be able to feel as though they still had some control, that they still had some of their roots, their French roots, their Spanish roots, but they were still kind of acclimating to the American way of doing things. So he was really kind of like a puppet master, and he was really smart because he did eventually get this done, but it was not an easy go. One of the things that the people of Louisiana did not like at all was that the same time that this was going on and that Claiborne was trying to establish, a semblance of normalcy in government for Louisiana based on the American democracy, American Congress, passed a law that banned international slave trade. Now, when you guys might remember, I hope you do, I hope you remember, but when Spain was over here, Governor Miro was really trying to just get to, I guess, what was the word I want to look for? He was really promoting huge plantations and big crops like cotton and indigo and rice and things like that. So Spain towards the end was a huge supporter of big farms that were eventually be called plantations. And the majority of people who did the work on these huge farms were slave labor. So when America decided that they were going to prohibit international slave trade, not domestic slave trade, just international, that meant that we could no longer go to Africa and get slaves on a slave ship and bring them over to Louisiana. Could not do that. So when they did this, the people of Louisiana took this as a personal affront that the Louisiana did not care about them, because their whole economic way of life for the majority of people that were living, especially down in Louisiana, was through these huge plantations. And so when when America says, okay, well, you can't import slaves anymore, like, well, how are we going to get our work done? You know, the cotton gin had just been invented, so they needed a lot of hands to kind of separate the seeds from the cotton to ship out. And they're saying, you're telling us that we can't get our slave labor? So that was a big issue. So right off the bat, well, I'm forgetting his name, Claiborne had a lot to deal with, because he already had a huge mob of animosity with the people of Louisiana, not only because of music and religion, but now also for economic reasons as well. So he set up, this is what he was trying to do this whole time. So like I said, Claiborne wanted to make sure that when he put the government of Louisiana in place, that it was appeasing to the people that were originally here. Because you know this, you don't mess with someone from Louisiana, okay? You don't tell us what to do. We will bargain with you, we will communicate, but don't come in here and tell me what to do. Don't do that to me. Oh no. So Claiborne knew that, okay? He was very aware that this was how it was. So he set up a bicameral government in Louisiana to kind of mirror what they had over in the United States. Bicameral means two houses. And when we get to the government parts of civics and all that kind of stuff, we'll explain it in much more detail. But right now, in the United States, at this time that we're talking about in the book and currently, we have a bicameral Congress. That means we have two houses. We have the Senate and the House of Representatives, okay? So Claiborne did the same thing to Louisiana. He's trying to ease them into this, okay? He's like, hey, this is what you guys are gonna, this is what you can expect. And he did it, he was very smart about the way he did it. There were two houses, the upper house and the lower house. Now, the upper house was a smaller house, and the president, Thomas Jefferson, appointed the members of the upper house. So these people were not going to be diehard French Cajuns or, Isleños or people from Louisiana. These were people that, a lot of them were from the United States, had come down here as Anglos, and now they were part of the upper house. Now, the upper house could nominate and elect the members of the lower house. Now, the lower house could make decisions, but just not to the extent of the upper house. I mean, they could make small decisions, not major ones, like the upper house. So Jefferson appointed a lot of people that were very American and wanted to, bring Louisiana over to the American way of doing things, to the upper house. And to keep the people of Louisiana happy and saying, hey, we have a say, we're okay, things are going not so bad. They appointed influential people in Louisiana, like influential Creoles and Cajuns and all these other things, to the lower house. So that way they were working together. But honestly, it was really the upper house who made all the choices. But the lower house didn't understand that. They just were like, wow, we're getting included and they're listening to us. And it really did help things. It really did. It really kind of fostered this sense of, okay, let's try and work together. We see that you guys are working with us, so we'll work with you. So it's pretty ingenious, actually. So then the issue came about of voting. Now, this was totally foreign to the people of Louisiana. They had no idea what voting was because they were ruled by a king. You just did what he said. So when voting came around, they were told that only white men who were landowners had the right to vote. Now, this is just right off the bat. That's all they knew. So right away, as America had kind of started to take over Louisiana, it established this notion among the people of Louisiana and the South. This is when the South is really starting to form. Those southern countries that joined the United States after the American Revolution, they were really controlled by monarchies, kings and queens. So when America came and said, okay, now you're part of us, and we're going to tell you about voting, they only gave the right to vote to rich white men. So right from the beginning, a precedent was set in these southern countries, these southern states, that the only people that were of value and the only people that they saw to be of value were rich white men. No Native Americans, absolutely no slaves, no free people of color, and no Native Americans. So right from day one, the thought in their head is like, okay, well, I guess I don't matter. And that kind of sets a precedent for what comes with the Civil War, because this notion only gets worse. It only becomes worse, saying that these rich white men are the ones that are controlling the South, and they're the ones that are going to control this, and we have all the say. So all of this is the beginning of the Civil War. This is where it's all starting. It's bubbling up right here. From the day one, because they said, you are the only ones who get to vote. And basically that says, you're the only one that matters, okay? So this is where it's really getting that, like I said, it's all playing into one another. It's building up, okay? It's bubbling at the surface. Some other things that Claiborne did as far as like the government of the territory of Orleans is that he set up parishes, which are very unique to the country. We are the only ones that have parishes. Other places have counties. Like I live in Collin County, and when I was living in Louisiana, I lived in St. Bernard Parish. So that's just the difference. He set up also police juries to kind of control what's going on. He separated he separated the whole territory of Orleans into different parishes, into like 19 different parishes. And I got that right. I remember the number. 19 different parishes, and each parish had their own police jury and their own little system of government, because the people of Louisiana were so unique that they decided this was the best way to kind of really work with all the people of Louisiana by establishing their own kind of leadership in your parish, and also having your own police presence that represented the demographic of a specific parish. Because we talked about when Spain was taking over, Spain had Louisiana towards the end, they were getting all kind of people coming in, and they were all settling in different places. So by having 19 parishes and having a seat of government in each parish and a police jury in each parish, that let that parish be representative of the majority of people that are living there. And think of it even now. If you go somewhere like Livingston Parish, your whole seat of government maybe, is different than, let's say, the seat of government in Orleans Parish, because it kind of represents the demographic. Okay, so we talked about cultural tension. We talked about that. All right, so now we're going to talk about, like I said before, the new American Slave Code, because this whole period of time is where it's going into the Civil War. This is all a precursor to the Civil War from day one. It wasn't just something that happened in the antebellum South, with the big dresses and like Scarlett O'Hara at the barbecue. This was something that was happening as far back as the 1803, as 1803. So because the new American Slave Code, because now we were a territory of the Americas, we were no longer Spanish, the new slave code was much more strict than the Spanish slave code. Because you remember in the Spanish slave code, and even in the Code Noir by the French, they gave a lot of enslaved Africans rights in a sense, not a lot of them, and not by any means a decent amount. They were terrible rights, but at least they did give them the opportunity to things like, purchase their freedom, to kind of earn money and things like that, and to have a say, go to court, and things like that, read and write, things like these things. So when we became part of America, those rights were taken away. And the new American Slave Code said that it was illegal for them to learn to read and write. It was illegal for the enslaved population to represent themselves in court. It was illegal for them to purchase their own freedom. Because and that was the big thing, especially in Louisiana. I mean, come on. Look at, or go back. I mean, so many people, free people of color, Creoles, Cajuns. That was like a huge thing. That was a huge population in Louisiana. So now that ended that, and it really made it a big deal. And that was a lot of problems because Louisiana was always this culture where it's like, you know, there were many free people of color in Louisiana, many of them. And by changing these slave laws, it really threw things into a huge kind of a problem for Louisiana. Now, Americans, like I said, when Claiborne was here, America passed passed a ban on international slave trade. Now, like I said, in these southern states or southern territories, there was a huge kind of focus on plantation life and having these big farms where they required slave labor. But now that they could not, you know, import slaves from other countries, we had to rely on the domestic slave trade. And this is when it gets really painful, like really hard and horrible. Because now the slave owners, it was terrible, they would no longer, like they said, they couldn't go buy slaves. So what they would do was they would make sure their slaves lived a long life and that they had a lot of kids so that they could sell off their children and they could work their slaves to death. So they wouldn't, and by doing this, making them live long was not some process where they were like, okay, you guys are family, whatever. No, it was like they did the bare minimum to keep them alive, and the very bare minimum. And once they had children, they looked the other way and said, okay, slaves could marry each other and things like that. And they looked the other way because they wanted them to have kids, because they wanted to sell the kids. So, you know, when the baby's old enough to not be nursed anymore, or, you know, be able to, you know, do little chores and things like that, so like 3 and 4 years old, that baby was ripped away from its parents, from its mom, and sometimes sold somewhere else. And that hits me so hard because I have a 5-year-old and I could never, ever imagine somebody taking her away from me. You know, and I've got the 16-year-old and the 11-year-old too. You know, the 16-year-old sometimes, you know, if y'all want her, no, I'm not going to sell her either. But, you know, but golly, I mean, can you imagine? And so this is when, like I say before, this is when it gets really sad, because this is when this whole notion that slaves are not people start to form. Because they think, well, they don't even think. They're property. They don't think. So it shouldn't matter that we're taking away their children. It shouldn't matter that we're just like, you know, taking away their family. It doesn't matter. So what? So what? They're just items, right? And this is where it starts to boil up. So like I said, this whole thing is brewing. This animosity, this tension, this dissension from people. It was not, look, I know that things are crazy right now. You know, there's lots of, you know, division, especially in our country right now. But this is not something that's new to our country. This has started as far back as we can go. So, but this is all, you know, bubbling up to become what would be the Civil War. And also where I think, and because I'm you know, I'm all philosophical and stuff like that, I think that the only way that we can ever, you know, get past terrible things like this and big separations and, you know, of each other is to learn about our past. And I think that that's the only way we can do it. And I know sometimes it's hard to learn and to understand and listen to some of these things, and it's just like you can't even believe it, like you can't even imagine it. But we are doomed to repeat our future if we don't learn from it. So, you know, I know that it may be uncomfortable for everybody sometimes to hear, especially when we start talking about slavery and things like that. I get it. I'm biracial, you know? So 100 years ago, my parents would have never been able to be together, ever. Okay, so, you know, I understand completely. So just know that I do understand if some of you do feel, you know, really emotional about this, and if you feel, you know, if it really makes you upset, I understand 100%. But let's talk about it, and let's review it as history so that we're never going to repeat that. Because underneath everything, everybody, we're all bleeding red, and that's it. We're all Americans, no matter what. And that's my firm belief. So I'll get off my soapbox, okay? So, but this is like we're seeing this. This is where this whole tension is brewing. Because now they have this notion that slaves don't even think that they don't, they're their property. What do they care? And this starts beginning to happen where it's so psychologically wrong. They're ripping apart families in ways that should never happen. And so this is all starting this is the 1800s. The Civil War, the beginning, this has all happening 1803, 1807, around there. Civil War happens in 1865. So it's all brewing until it gets to the point where it's like gonna explode. Okay? So there's a whole issue with that. So what we're going to be talking about in class, because, I've talked so long, I feel like I really need some water and some jelly beans, like for real. So what we're going to talk about in class, though, on our Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to go over 2 parts that I have not discussed in this Miss Meyer show. And that's going to be the rebellions that affect Louisiana, and that's going to be here on pages 178, 179, and 180. So we're going to talk about this in class. So make sure if you missed the class, you go to the recordings. Plus, my class is amazingly fun, and you guys love it, right? That's what we're going to talk about on Thursday. And on Tuesday, we're going to talk about... Ooh, I think I might have ripped my book. Well, I already write in it, right? So on Tuesday, we're going to talk about border disputes and things with Louisiana and Spain and stuff like that. So Tuesday is border disputes. Thursday is rebellions and how they impact Louisiana. Don't forget that you have to, guys, it's so important, attend these small groups. I know you're like, I don't want to have to go to a small group. Everyone has to go to them, every single person. And they're fun. And they're ways for me to really get you to understand topics and to do things. I promise. I never do things without a purpose. Promise you, promise you, promise you. I was never a Girl Scout, but what is the Girl Scout pledge? Is it this? Or I don't know what it is. Whatever. I just like your cookies. Okay, trust me, I had to buy so many last year. I bought like over $200 worth of boxes because I was left with them because Kate was in Girl Scouts. Hence, she is no longer in Girl Scouts. But for real, I had $200 worth of cookies last year. No lie. Okay, so today's code word for the Miss Meyer show, and I wrote it down. I did write it down because, I will forget. Is American. Just like we are all, it turns, every time someone calls my phone, it turns off the camera and I've got to redo it. Ay, sorry. Lo siento. So code word is Americans. We are all Americans deep down. We're all Louisianians, of course. I am still Louisianian. Even though I live in Texas, I will always be a Louisianian and always be a Chalmatian. High five, Chalmette. But we're also all Americans. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I will see you in class next week, and I really, really love teaching you guys. You are the most favorite thing about my whole entire teaching career is being there. And you guys, this class, your class right now is just phenomenal. One of my favorites that I've ever had. So that's all I've got. See you next time, guys. Bye. If one more person comes and messes up the symmetry of my pillows, I don't know if I'll be able to contain myself. I may lose it, Blue. Okay? So you two, you're allowed to sit out here, but no pillow messing, okay? Seriously. You listening to me, Blue? I mean you specifically, because you have a weight problem and you're so large that you can shift the pillows around, and that frightens me. So can you just take your just huge body and not touch the pillows? Okay? Are we in agreement? Can you close your eyes if you're listening? Thank you. I got it. No. You in there for 13 minutes. Do we hit our mommies? Do we hit our mommies?
No.
That's not nice. You have 13 minutes and time out. Turn around, face the wall. We don't hit our mommies. You have 13 minutes. Face the wall.
Okay, I can't turn anymore. You better sit, or your minutes are gonna start over. They don't start until you stop. Do we hit our mommies? No, we don't. Tigger, do we scratch our mommies when they try to play with our tails? Get back in timeout. Get back in timeout. Get in timeout. Get in timeout. You punish.